All right, so I'll go ahead and get us started. We've got a lot of ground to cover today, and we want to make sure we have plenty of time for Q&A at the end of our presentation. So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the first of two application workshops for our Sustainable Communities program, Call for Applications focused on active transportation and safety. My name is Rachel and I'll be co-facilitating today's workshop with my colleague Andres Carrasquillo. So if you haven't already, if you could type your name and organization into our chat feature, this will help us know who's in the room and ensure that the chat function is working for you. And also just want to note, as you saw as you entered the room, this meeting is being recorded for future reference. And also SCAG is providing closed captioning for this session. If you'd like to activate or hide that feature, you can click the live transcript button along your bottom menu and choose either the show subtitle or hide subtitle. Okay, now just for a few session logistics, this workshop is scheduled for an hour and a half. All of your mics will be muted as you're entering and during the first portion or the presentation of our workshop. Once we transition to the Q&A session, please make sure to keep your mic muted unless you're asking a question, just so we can make sure that we don't have any background noise. If you have any questions at any point along this workshop, feel free to type in the chat box. We've got a team monitoring that. And then again, you can ask your questions later on after the presentation. And then following today's workshop, if you think of anything later, you're more than welcome to reach out with the office hours that we'll be sharing later today, and then also just via email as we have my contact information on the slide. Before we get started, I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement. We are currently on occupied and unceded land of Indigenous people who are and have been the traditional caretakers of the land in this region. If you haven't already, I encourage you all to visit nativeland.ca to learn more about the traditional inhabitants of the land you live and work on. All right, so for today, we've got a jam-packed agenda. Want to make sure you have a good understanding of our call for applications. So we're going to start off by giving an overview of our program, covering the funding objectives, the project categories, and applicant eligibility. We'll then dive into our two specific project categories, which are the community or area-wide plans, and also quick build projects. We'll discuss some of the engagement resources that are available through GoHuman before covering the application scoring rubric and a brief walkthrough of the application itself. We'll spend some time talking about some tips and tricks on how to craft a competitive application and also share various resources we've got, such as an application checklist, timeline, and additional resources of data sources that you can review as you pull together your application. We'll then have time for Q&A. So by the end of the workshop, we hope that all participants will understand the application timeline, the process, requirements, and scoring rubric, and use that to understand what you can do to make a competitive application and feel prepared to submit your application. And of course, as we've mentioned before, have an opportunity to ask questions. So we'll start with two quick check-in polls. The first question is to get a sense of who's in the room. So we have two questions to get this to get a sense of this. First is, what county are you seeking funding in, and what type of organization do you represent? So that should be coming on the screen in a moment. And we'll give folks a little bit of time to answer those questions. Alrighty, so I'm going to go ahead and close our poll so we can show the results. Got almost everyone participating. Okay, here we go. So you should see the results on your screen. We've got the majority of folks participating from Los Angeles County, but we are really excited to see we've got representation from all of our 6 counties. And then looking at the type of organizations we have in the room, a majority of folks are from a local or regional agency. We've got a few from community-based organizations, and then school districts, special districts, and a few others. Great. Thank you so much for participating. Right. Then I'll hand it over to you, Andres.
Thanks, Rachel. Uh, this particular call is part of the Sustainable Communities Program, which is a technical assistance grant for local jurisdictions that support the implementation of the regional planning goals from ConnectSoCal. And SCAG solicits new calls for applications that align with the priorities of the ConnectSoCal plan. The SCP for Active Transportation and Safety is the first call for applications following the adoption of ConnectSoCal 2024. The goals of this call for applications are to improve mobility across the region, especially for children and older adults, and people walking, biking, riding transit, rail, and using other forms of active transportation. To strategically invest in communities most harmed by traffic injuries and fatalities, which include the historically disinvested communities that comprise the majority of that regional high injury network. To support a more resilient transportation network, especially in anticipation of the large-scale events hosted by the region, and to support local efforts to increase competitiveness for state and federal funding. This call for applications includes 2 project categories: community area-wide plans and quick build projects. And no matter what type of project that you choose for your application, we want to emphasize that robust, inclusive, and equitable community engagement strategies are a required component on all projects and should be integrated into your project scopes. For community area-wide plans, the maximum award is $500,000. Community plans must encompass, be located in, or overlap with a disadvantaged community. And area-wide plans must encompass at least one disadvantaged community. With build projects, the maximum award is $900,000. Projects must engage the community before and after implementation, and they must be in place at least 6 months before conducting evaluations. These projects are not required to be in a disadvantaged community. The following are eligible applicants for this call for applications: local or regional agencies, Caltrans, transit agencies, natural resources or public land agencies, public schools or school districts, tribal governments, and private nonprofit tax-exempt organizations that are responsible for the management of public lands. And here we'll provide a review of the first project category. As a partner for SCP awardees, SCAG provides extensive support in the project administration. And community and area-wide plans will be completed with consultant assistance. SCAG will procure and hold the consultant contract with the awardee part of the review process. Once the work begins, the project will be assigned a SCAG project manager that handles the contract administration and supports the awardee project manager. That awardee project manager will focus on the project's direction and facilitate coordination within and across departments. With the leadership of this project team, and that support from SCAG, the consultant will produce the plan. And examples of those resulting plans include active transportation plans, bicycle and or pedestrian master plans, first last mile plans focused on active transportation, safe routes plans such as to school, for seniors, etc., and transportation safety focused plans such as local road safety plans or safe system plans with a focus on active transportation. The previous active transportation and safety call for applications in the 2020 Sustainable Communities Program has funded plans in Montebello and Duarte in Los Angeles County and Banning in Riverside County. As noted, community area-wide plans must benefit at least one disadvantaged community. The call guidelines allow applicants to consider one of multiple definitions of disadvantaged communities, including SCAG's own priority equity communities. And in just a quick overview of those priority equity communities, this data set uses 2020 census tracts, and a tract is considered a priority equity community if there is a concentration above the county average of the following: both low-income households and people of color, or either low-income households or people of color, and four or more of the following: vulnerable ages, which include 65 and over and under 18, people with disabilities, people with limited English proficiency, limited vehicle and transit access, people without a high school diploma, single parent households, and housing cost burden households. We will drop in a chat a map that SCAG has provided of the region's priority equity communities. So it is easy for you to identify if one of these communities is in your project area. The call considers other eligible definitions drawn from the ATP Cycle 7 guidelines, which include median household income, CalEnviroscreen, National School Lunch Program, Healthy Places Index, Climate and Environmental Justice Screening Tool, USDOT Equitable Transportation Community Explorer, and Native American Tribal Lands. Plans must include requirements from the ATP Cycle 7 guidelines, a particular Appendix A, or explain why a component is not applicable. And example components include mode share, existing and proposed bicycle or pedestrian facilities, collision analysis, community engagement, project prioritization, implementation approach, and a resolution showing the adoption of the plan. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Rachel.
So we're going to now transition to talking about the quick build projects. Again, starting with project administration. So similar to plans, SCAG will be a partner with awardees in implementing quick builds. So SCAG will procure and hold the contract with the consultant, and the awardee will be part of this whole process, being involved in the proposal review committee. And then once a consultant is selected, again, the SCAG project manager will handle the administration in terms of invoices and reporting for the respective grant requirements, and really serving as a support system for the awardee project manager. So the awardee project manager will again facilitate the project direction and also coordination within and across departments. And then specifically for quick builds, the awardee will be leading implementation. So just staying on the right side of this diagram, there's two ways implementation may occur. One is through agency staff, perhaps pulling in public works staff to implement a quick build, or going through a procurement process through the city or county, whatever the local awardee is, and going through the agency's process to procure a contractor. And then for the actual development of the quick build design and engagement and evaluation, that will be the consultant that was procured through SCAG's process. And that consultant would be responsive to the SCAG and awardee PM. So just to start off, defining a quick build to ensure everyone's on the same page and understanding this type of project. Quick build projects are really focused on implementing near-term bicycle, pedestrian, or traffic safety improvements. And these projects use durable, low to medium cost materials that can be easily changed or removed. So we'll get into examples of those materials, but just to show where quick builds fall on the spectrum of project types, there's a graphic on the screen. So on the left, we have demonstration projects. Perhaps if you've used SCAG's Go Human kit of parts, that's an example where you're really demonstrating something, but maybe just for a couple hours or maybe a day or two. And on the right-hand side, there's permanent installation, which requires a lot more construction, excavation. It's more permanent and typically has a significantly longer time frame. So quick builds fall right in the middle where maybe you're piloting a project to test out a design and gather community feedback and or implement an interim design as your agency is working on securing more permanent funding. So we've got a couple slides of just examples of quick build elements. So the first two photos are examples of protected bike lanes. The separation can happen not only with the striping, but getting the protection with planters, such as an example on the left with the city of Ojai, or using parking with striping or plastic posts. Also, another example is implementing a neighborhood traffic circle that can use rubber curbs, plastic posts, paint, and signage. So there's an example on the right-hand side from the city of El Monte. Couple more examples, just generally enhancing pedestrian infrastructure. So on the left, another photo from El Monte with paint and plastic posts for curb extension. Another element could be using planters as well in a curb extension. And then also RRFBs or rectangular rapid flashing beacons, or some folks will just call it flashing beacons. That's paired with a crosswalk to raise visibility of people crossing. And then on the right-hand side, we have a photo in the city of LA of temporary transit platforms. So these are not the full comprehensive list of quick build elements, just an example, but overall, quick build elements are generally pretty easy to install with minimal construction and therefore can also be easily modified or removed. So just a couple more examples of full-on projects. First is a quick build in the city of Glendale along Brand Boulevard. This project was installed earlier this year, and the city is still in the process of gathering feedback from the community and making adjustments to the project design. This project features the addition of a protected bike lane and also curb extensions with artistic features, which you can see on the right-hand photo. One more example is in the city of El Monte. So in the quick build element examples, we pulled some photos, but this project was also implemented earlier this year, and the project included a road diet, curb extensions, and a traffic circle to test if these improvements could help reduce vehicle speeds and also reduce conflicts between people who are driving, walking, and biking through this intersection. And also, the project is really looking to improve safety for students who are walking to and from a nearby school. So quick build projects and elements, they're not new, but the process may be relatively new for some jurisdictions. So we just want to show here that the quick build process is intended to be iterative and flexible. So this is just a general sense of the timeline, but every project is unique depending on the needs. So starting with outreach and initial design, that can be anywhere from 6 to 12 months. Ideally, you're pulling from community feedback, maybe from a plan or just community feedback that you've heard, or maybe collision history, and then working on it, doing that initial design. And then implementation can take anywhere from just a couple days to a few months, really depending on the scope or the size of the project. And then after anywhere from typically 6 months to 3 years. It's an evaluation period to assess how people are responding to the project and how well the project is having an impact on the potential outcomes that the jurisdiction is hoping to see. So based on evaluation, which can happen on an ongoing basis, there's opportunities to modify designs. As quick builds, as we noted, should be relatively easy to modify and adjust. So that can also happen kind of in alignment with the evaluation, so the 6 months and then to 5 years. And so you see on the graphic, there's kind of a circular element where it's iterative and flexible to implement something, evaluate, and then modify, and keep kind of going around in that process. And then the final result could be either transitioning to a permanent project or removing the design and trying something else. And so the timeline in terms of kind of that 5 year cap, that's just based on how the duration or durability of the typical materials as they're out on the street being used. So as part of the Quick Build application, applicants will need to submit a conceptual plan illustrating the proposed elements. This is just an example from the city of Santa Monica's Quick Build, and you'll see this is relatively simple. It's a conceptual plan where there's an aerial map showing the existing and proposed cross sections, and then just call outs or graphics showing the proposed improvements. And so this is kind of just give a general sense of what the applicant is proposing, but really the intent of a quick build is that through the engagement process that this design can really change based on the community feedback. And then as the design is getting finalized to 100%, maybe some feasibility considerations come into play that may also adjust the final plan. So to reflect the intent of a quick build project serving as an engagement tool and a mechanism to implement near-term improvements, the quick build projects funded through the SCP require the following. The first is ongoing community engagement. The engagement is used to shape the final design and also inform evaluation after the quick build is implemented. Data collection is also critical to not only establish existing conditions, but also to connect evaluation with metrics such as vehicle speeds, vehicle counts, bicycle and pedestrian counts, and collisions. And then also a final design is needed in order to implement a quick build, and that will need to be reviewed, approved, and stamped by a licensed professional engineer or PE. And then the project will be installed for a minimum of 6 months before conducting evaluation. This just gives time for people to get used to the project and for kind of travel patterns to kind of settle in after a new project is installed. And then finally, a final report that will summarize the work completed and outline next steps. And the intent of the final report is it's not only just summarizing everything that's been done, but hopefully to set the awardee up for future funding opportunities. So now moving on to some of the engagement resources that are available for awardees. Projects are expected to incorporate one or both of the following engagement resources. The first is the Go Human Kit of Parts. We're excited that many jurisdictions in the SCAG region have already utilized the Kit of Parts, but the Kit of Parts is essentially a tool that has modular pieces to demonstrate complete street elements. So the image on the screen is one example of a artistic crosswalk where likely RAM board was cut up and laid out on a crosswalk, and then participants are able to help design that artistic crosswalk. Other elements include a parklet and then also curb extension. And another resource is the Traffic Safety Awareness Campaign, and this includes co-branded Go Human print and digital advertisements. So these resources are available at no cost for cities and other local government agencies. So awardees will certainly have an opportunity to use these resources, but we also want to share if you're not participating in the SCP, these are also resources that are available. So certainly encourage you to check them out. And then just wanted to show one example of how the engagement resources can inform a project. So here we have a project in the city of Long Beach in the Washington neighborhood. So on the left-hand side, this is a kit of parts demonstration where the community demonstrated an artistic crosswalk. So you can see, or sorry, an artistic curb extension. So you can see the little squares of artwork that are kind of laid out on the ground to kind of show the location of a curb extension. And on the right-hand side, this is a quick build that was installed. So you see there's art that's been painted on the ground, and then there are plastic posts to also have a vertical element of the curb extension. Then we'll turn over to Andres.
Thanks, Rachel. All applications are scored on 6 criteria. Mobility for 25 points, safety benefit, 35 points, public health, 10 points, disadvantaged communities, 10 points, public participation, 15 points, and cost effectiveness, 5 points, for a total of 100 points. Final awards will be based on application score, geographic distribution across the region, and funding eligibility. And at this point, I'll briefly demonstrate our online application. Okay. So on the SCP website, let me just pull this up here at scag.ca.gov/SCP, scroll to the Start Application button all the way here at the bottom. If you're interested in drafting content offline first, we have a document file of the application available under applicant resources, and we'll make reference to all of these resources here later in this webinar. So the online application is available through the JotForm platform. You have the option to save your work by making a JotForm account. So I'll just pull here a version that I already started filling out. So this application asks for content. This first page asks for contact information, applicant, project manager, project information, etc. If your agency is submitting multiple applications, you should note that as well. And you have the opportunity to note the priority of the application. And at the end of this initial page, you'll see the opportunity to select a project type, community area-wide plan or quick build. There are unique questions to each of these project categories, so be sure you're selecting the correct one. And on the next page, you will see those opportunities to provide your narrative in response to each of the questions. And there are also fields for you to upload and attach certain attachments such as a map, scope of work, schedule, budget, and letters of support. And I will stop. And Jennifer, if we could resume with the PowerPoint. Great. We have a detailed evaluation rubric available on our website under that applicant resources section. We'll also include a link in the chat. Also under applicant resources, you can find templates for the scope of work, schedule, and budget. Each template provides detailed instructions that help you complete the document. So please familiarize yourself with those instructions to ensure that you are providing all of the necessary information. The template content in the scope of work serves as your starting point. Applicants should modify the activities as needed and identify the deliverables. The scope of work template also includes a blank schedule. The schedule, the tasks and subtasks of this schedule should match your scope of work, and the schedule should provide a realistic overview of the time needed to complete the project. Projects typically have up to 36 months for completion. The budget template file is its own separate workbook, and there are 3 versions of a budget template based on project category and the availability of an indirect cost rate. The budget template provides detailed instructions in the Read Me First tab that help applicants choose the correct version. Please provide your budget by task and make sure your tasks match with your scope of work. Community area-wide plans are completed by a consultant, so the budget should be in the consultant line. Quick Builds will use a consultant for planning and engagement. For the implementation of those quick build projects, applicants can either use a contractor or city staff. These costs, as well as costs for quick build material, should be budgeted by task. And for quick build projects, applicants may use a federally approved indirect cost rate. If you have any questions about this, your agency's finance staff can help. As you prepare your application, please keep these tips in mind. First, review the guidelines and scoring rubric and make sure you respond directly to the question. Make connections to Connect SoCal 2024. The program guidelines provide links to relevant passages in that plan. And finally, provide context. What does the evaluator need to know to understand the safety and mobility needs? And a complete application includes the following: an online submission, a project map, a scope of work, schedule, and proposed budget, a conceptual plan for quick build projects, and 3 letters of support. Since this call opened in July 8th, we have been supporting the application period with these application workshops, as well as open office hours with SCAG staff. The call will close on September 27, and we will evaluate applications in October and November. We anticipate award recommendations to be made in December, with formal approval following in June 2025. In the late summer and early fall, we will develop MOUs and begin the procurement process. And I will pass to Rachel.
Great. So we've covered a lot and we want to get a sense to see how you're all feeling about applying to this program. So we've got one more poll with 2 questions. So first question will ask the type of project you're seeking funding for. So again, we mentioned the plans and our quick build projects. And then we have another question just to get a sense of how folks are feeling at this point, about how much you agree with the following statement: I feel ready to apply. So we'll go ahead and initiate that poll. Okay, so I know we've got, oh, not quite everyone has responded, but we'll go ahead and close our poll just to share our results. So a pretty even distribution. We've got across the plans, projects, and submitting both applications. We've got that pretty evenly divided, and then a few folks who are not sure yet. So as mentioned, there's no, or we may not have mentioned, but just to be clear, applicants are welcome to submit multiple applications. You could do one plan, one quick build, or multiple quick builds, or multiple plans. There's not a limit. As Andres shared, we would just ask that you show the priority for each application. And then for the second statement about how folks feel about if they're ready or not to apply, we've got majority who feel ready, but a few folks who don't feel quite ready. So going to our next slide. As Andres mentioned, we've tried our best to provide as many resources as possible. So on our SCP webpage, if you kind of scroll down near the bottom, we've got a section that summarizes all of our applicant resources. So we've got our guidelines, which many of you have not only provided feedback on the draft guidelines, but hopefully have had a chance to review our final guidelines. We also have a fact sheet that summarizes kind of all the components of this call, another link to our online application, and then we have a PDF, what is called application resources, and that's essentially just a list of links about various data sources for collision data or public health data, and also a step-by-step guide on how to use our priority equity communities map. Then we have a Word and PDF version of all of the application questions and the associated evaluation criteria. This is intended to help you understand kind of what sort of response you can craft to put together a competitive application, and also hopefully help inform project selection. And also to the Word document could help kind of coordinate internally or with any collaborators to put together your grant application answers before formally inserting them online. And then we have links to those scope of work and budget templates. So when you click on those, that'll trigger an automatic download to your computer. Alrighty. So now we have plenty of time for Q&A. We did receive a few questions through our registration form, so we have those on hand, but we'll start off with just checking if we have any questions in the chat, or if you'd like to ask them live, feel free to raise your hand and we'll go through and call on folks. So Anika, we'll start. Did we receive any questions in the chat yet?
We haven't received any questions in the chat, but we just received one here from Natalie.
Mm-hmm.
Can a community choice aggregator apply?
So we have our list of eligible applicants. I will admit I am not extremely familiar with a community choice aggregator. Andres, do you have anything you could add here?
With that particular organization type, we will have to do a little bit more research to confirm with that, but I can't say for
Okay,
certain right now.
got it. Thank you, Natalie, for confirming it's a not-for-profit. So the eligibility requirements of this grant are shaped by our funding sources, which include the Active Transportation Program, or the ATP, and then also Safe Streets and Roads for All federal grant. So for this particular call, a not-for-profit would not be eligible to be a lead applicant. However, you could certainly partner with your local city or county, maybe a school district, depending on the type of project you're interested in, and submit an application. All right, I see another question in the chat. I'll go ahead and read it out loud. The question was, do cities need an active plan in order to qualify for quick build funds? Having a plan is not an eligibility requirement for to submit for quick build, so that's not required. I'll just add that if having like pulling from a plan is really helpful just to show the sort of engagement and process that led to the quick build project identification. But in your project application, if you're able to talk about maybe a different type of planning effort or sort of engagement that occurred to help identify the project, that would help strengthen your proposal.
Great, thank you. And we have another question in the chat. Can you repeat or clarify the process for procuring consultants? These consultants are contracted by SCAG after the funds are awarded for both grant types.
Yes, I can go through that again. So kind of talking specifically just across both projects for consultant procurement. So SCAG would partner with the awardee to finalize the scope of work, the budget, the schedule, and the request for proposals would be administered under SCAG's procurement process. And in the process of reviewing or evaluating proposals and interviewing prospective consultants, the awardee would be part of a proposal review committee. So that was where we indicated on the sort of hierarchy or process that the awardees involved with selection. And then SCAG is holding the contract with the consultant. And really the intent is that SCAG is providing extensive technical assistance in processing invoices, and the SCAG project manager would connect and coordinate with the awardee project manager to confirm that the invoices are looking acceptable, or like go over any questions. And SCAG PM would be responsible for processing those invoices and then handling quarterly invoicing and reporting for the grant source. So really, where SCAG is trying to provide the assistance to reduce the administrative load on awardees to administer a project. And so that's where the consultant is, contractually responsive to SCAG, but in practice for the project itself, it's really the awardee project manager who's driving the project, shaping the direction that it's going in. And then briefly, I'll mention for quick builds, SCAG is not an implementing agency. We don't own roadways, we don't do construction. And so we're really deferring, and we would establish a memorandum of understanding for both types of projects, plans or quick builds. But for the quick builds, the memorandum of understanding would function as a mechanism for SCAG to pass through funds to the awardee, so that the awardee, a city, a county, could procure a contractor or have their own staff implement the quick build project. And for the process of, let's say, a city procuring a contractor, they would go through the city's procurement process, and since each city has different requirements for construction, but ultimately that procurement process would need to be adhering to funding requirements around like competitive bids and whatnot. So really encourage folks to review our program guidelines, which reference the various requirements, such as the Local Assistance Procedures Manual from Caltrans. And if you have any questions, please, again, feel free to reach out or register for office hours.
Great, thank you. And we have another question here from Maggie that kind of piggybacks off this. For quick build, does the SCAG procured consultant prepare and sign the design plans?
Yes. So assuming that the applicant had submitted a conceptual plan, going through the process of finalizing that design, the consultant that is procured would be a firm that is able to not only do kind of planning work of engagement, but also engineering design. And because the consultant's producing the design, their PE would sign, but there would be ongoing coordination, just like any other engineering and design project, where ideally there's awardee staff, whether it's your engineering staff, your traffic engineer, et cetera, being involved in reviewing and concurring with kind of the final plan.
Thank you, Rachel. Another question here from Jeremy. Is disadvantaged communities still preferred for quick build, even if it isn't required? Was the score sheet that showed 10 points for disadvantaged communities applicable to both grant types? and if the build itself isn't in a disadvantaged community, but the majority of users will be from a disadvantaged community, like a bike path from a disadvantaged community to a park, can it still qualify for both grant types?
So kind of answering the first part, is the disadvantaged community designation preferred for quick builds, even if it's not required? You'll see in this, as you know, in the scoring rubric, there are additional points awarded for projects that are within a disadvantaged community. So for quick builds, those 10 points are split where 5 points are awarded for project, up to 5 points are awarded for projects that are located in or have some portion of that project in a priority equity community or other disadvantaged community designation. But then there's another 5 points that can be received. Let's say the project's not physically in or overlapping with a disadvantaged community, but if you have a narrative that talks about how this project would benefit disadvantaged communities, whether it's a formal definition or a way that you craft in a narrative of a disadvantaged community for your community, that's still an opportunity to get those full 5 points. And the way that this rubric is shaped, as Andres noted at the beginning of this presentation, our call is really shaped by the goals. And one of our goals is to invest in the historically disinvested and disadvantaged communities, particularly looking at our regional high injury network. So that's where we see that connection back to Connect SoCal. I think there's a last part. If the quick build is not in a disadvantaged community, but the majority of users, I'm not quite sure, Jeremy, what you mean by if it can qualify for both grant types, since the project is specifically for quick builds. But I think to answer it broadly, just to reiterate, plans have a requirement just based on our funding source from the ATP to be located in or overlap with a disadvantaged community. And if for quick builds, it's not required, but certainly in project selection, it would be a competitive decision to look for opportunities to align with a disadvantaged community.
Great, thanks so much, Rachel. We have another question here from Marianne. Is the construction of an elevator or chairlift qualified for this grant?
So this would kind of, because it's a construction question, it would be closest to a quick build. But again, a quick build is a type of project that requires minimal construction, so no excavation, really minimal things such as a paint or attaching a plastic post to the ground, or putting down like a modular transit stop. So something as extensive as constructing an elevator or chairlift would not be an eligible cost for the grant.
Another question here from Paige about eligibility for quick build. For quick build projects, does it have to be along one corridor and or for one quick build element, or can it be a combination of elements across a community?
Sure, that's a really good question. So there's no restriction in terms of where a quick build needs to be located. So it could be along an arterial or a local road, and then it doesn't have to just be one corridor. So just to give an example, we had that City of El Monte project that was in one intersection. For the City of Glendale, that was along one corridor. We didn't share here, but in ATP Cycle 6, LA County received funding for a quick build project that's across 16 different intersections in a community. So there's certainly different approaches to a quick build project. And it would, I would say it could be one element, but I would encourage applicants to consider pairing multiple elements just to really increase the potential impacts of a quick build project. So instead of just high visibility crosswalks, for example, maybe consider other pedestrian safety improvements such as a curb extension, or with maybe a bike lane, consider not only implementing that bike lane, but thinking about how can the safety or visibility of cyclists be increased at an intersection, or even pairing both bicycle and pedestrian safety improvements.
Thanks so much, Rachel. We have another question here from Paige. Can you also go over the timely use of funds and time extensions again?
Sure. So for planning projects, that will be funded through the Active Transportation Program. And for folks who have applied to the ATP, there's different phases in terms of, awardee and allocation and whatnot. So SCAG is handling all of that, but the actual implementation of the plan, the ATP gives 36 months for completion. And technically, there is an opportunity for a 12-month extension. That's generally just due to kind of circumstances that are out of the project's control. So really, think of it as 36 months to complete a plan. And then similar for quick builds, part of the funding may come from the ATP. So that will be 36 months to conduct the engagement, design, implementation. Keep in mind 6 months for keeping that project in place before evaluation is conducted. So you really want to have a good sense of what your project may look like, and also a good engagement schedule that has engagement before and after implementation. And then the time extension opportunities are different for quick builds. For ATP funded projects, the ATP allows a 3-month extension. And the intent for that is that quick builds are intended to be quick. So the state really doesn't want to give that 12-month to encourage awardees to really focus on getting the quick build implemented. Some quick builds may also get funded through the Safe Streets and Roads for All federal grant. Technically, that grant has a 5-year implementation period, but given our SCAG's goals to get the quick builds implemented in the near term, we're aligning with the ATP timeline to aim for a 3-year project timeframe. But we certainly have flexibility, but given a lot of the interest that we've heard from our local jurisdictions of wanting to get safety improvements in the ground as soon as possible, we think that 3-year term should hopefully work for most applicants.
Thanks so much. We have another question here from Natalie. How many awardees can there be?
The awardees will be shaped by our funding availability. So you'll see in our grant guidelines and the general engagement that we've done around our program, we have an estimated 10.4 million available to fund plans and quick builds. As many of you may have heard, or if you haven't, we'll be sharing here. So ATP Cycle 7, which is one of the funding sources, has essentially undergone budget cuts given the final state budget that was enacted in June of this year. So the ATP funds that are available for this grant program, I won't get into all the details, kind of a little wonky, but it's kind of a percentage based on the overall state funding availability. So right now we don't have a final number. We're still aiming for that estimated 10.4 million, but SCAG staff are having internal discussions on what our final funding availability will be. But ultimately, it's just shaped by our funding availability.
Thank you, Rachel. Seeing no other questions from the chat, if anyone else has any questions.
Anika, I think I actually see one from Mary. Oh, you know what? I'm noticing here the question I got from Marianne, it was sent directly to me, so it's not showing up for you. So let me read it out loud and then I can answer it. So the question is this grant a reimbursement style? Do we need to fund the project first and then seek reimbursement after the actual costs are incurred? So I'll break that down by our project type. So with plans, there's not real for the awardee, there's reimbursement is not involved because SCAG will hold a contract with the consultant, and then SCAG would be directly, reimbursing those invoices to the consultant. So that part, again, that's where SCAG is providing that technical assistance and administrative support. And that also carries over for quick builds with the consultant contract. However, for the quick build implementation, that would essentially be a reimbursement sort of scenario. So whether it's city staff who are implementing or a contractor, the city would pay city staff or pay the contractor and then submit an invoice to SCAG to get reimbursement for that labor and the quick build elements.
Great, thank you, Rachel. I see one other question here from All American War Veterans. I don't know if you want to speak on this question, but how about an intensive and extensive the Emerald Necklace re-education to the public, creating some events or major events like fundraising concerts? I'm assuming you're talking about, is this eligible under types of projects?
I think that's the question as well.
Yeah.
So an event like a fundraising concert would not be an eligible project type or grant request from this grant program. This grant, again, is funding the development of a plan and also the implementation of quick builds. So if there's an opportunity maybe to develop a plan around active transportation for a certain area, or to implement some sort of quick build infrastructure in alignment with the concept of an emerald necklace, that may be eligible, but just for specific events and educational efforts, that would not be an eligible cost or project type under this grant program.
Awesome, thanks so much. I see another question here from Mark. Does the grant cover comprehensive updates to an ATP LRSP, or does it only apply to cities that don't currently have a plan in place?
That's a good question. So the grant, it would cover an update. Again, for plans, it's really driven by the ATP guidelines that Andres went over, and your ATP or LRSP, it likely has these components that are noted in the ATP guidelines, where as you do an update, you would do, update your existing conditions of mode share, the existing facilities for people walking and biking, engagement, collision analysis, etc. And so if your city already has a plan, but you're looking to update it, completely eligible to apply. Your application would just really, I think it'd be good to, build on the work that's been done and indicate why there's a need to make an update.
Great, thank you. And I'm gonna switch over to a question from the workshop registration. I think that question was asked during the workshop registration, but here's another one. Arterial projects, major intersections prioritized over smaller neighborhood scale treatments?
So for quick builds, you'll see in our evaluation rubric, there's no prioritization of the location. Whether your project is on an arterial or on local streets, you'll see in our rubric that the questions are really around trying to understand what's the project need, and then how is the project responding to it, and then what does engagement and evaluation look like. So it's really all about kind of the need and how the project is responding to the need. So the need may be from input from the community and or a collision history and analysis, and then looking at how the quick build could respond to that, and then engage with the community to kind of get a sense of how that project is working or not, regardless of the context, and then getting feedback to finalize the design or kind of the next steps for that project.
Thanks, Rachel. And then our other questions that we received in the workshop registration also had to do with eligible activities. We touched on this a little bit, but I just wanted to raise the question since they were asked. Does a bicycle pedestrian education plan count as an area-wide plan? And are updates to active transportation plans or complete streets plans or Vision Zero plans eligible activities? So you kind of touched on that last question before, but thought I would join this together.
Sure. So kind of touching upon that first question, inquiring if kind of a plan, I'm assuming the plan is outlining bicycle and pedestrian education. For folks who are familiar with the ATP, the term for this type of effort is like non-infrastructure. So that's kind of the education engagement efforts. So if there's interest to develop kind of countermeasures or strategies focused on education, that's certainly an eligible component of a plan. But again, encourage you to look back at the requirements in the ATP guidelines and just the various components of developing a plan. So it's really for those of you who have gone through a process or have been involved in developing a plan, it's that just general process of conducting engagement, identifying priorities, understanding existing conditions, and then using that process of engagement and existing conditions analysis to start identifying what are the priorities, what are the projects, and then developing a process to prioritize those projects, and then thinking about an implementation plan. So there's quite a few elements, but at a very high level, I'd say it's really illustrating the high level parts of the planning process.
These are great questions, and thank you, Rachel, for your great answers. We have one other question here from Nicole. You mentioned that there is an estimated 10.4 million available. Is that for both plans and quick builds?
Yes, so 10.4 million is our overall funding availability. There are some nuances, again, shaped by our funding sources. So for plans, these are specifically funded through the Active Transportation Program, and the state guidelines have kind of guidance indicating that only 2% of SCAG's regional ATP funds can go towards plans. And so at this point, just based on the fund estimate for overall cycle 7 ATP, of that 10.4, we have up to 700,000 available for plans. This may change. Again, it's a little bit getting into the details, but the ATP cycle 7, following the state budget adopted in June, it was reduced or had budget cuts of 400 million. There may be a time when the state legislature makes that 400 million available for cycle 7, but at this time, the 4 million, they say it's subject to appropriation, which means subject to being made available for the ATP. So certainly there's an opportunity to advocate to have that 400 million be made available for the ATP. But at this time, just based on kind of following the guidelines and the calculations that the guidelines lay out, we have up to 700,000. And then the remainder would go towards quick builds. We have about 4.5 million specifically set aside for quick builds from our SS4A grant, and then 3 million as a local match. So that's 7.5 million. So that's how we get to that 10.4. There's a lot of little moving parts, but overall, just to answer it very simply, yes, the 10.4 is for both types of projects, but there's a little bit of nuance. And we can't really say like the number of projects that would be funded for each project type. It really depends on the proposed budget. So even though a plan has up to 500,000, as an applicant, you may decide, I think we only need 200,000, 250,000 to complete this plan. So that's why we have applicants go through the scope of work and budget process just to get a sense of how much funding is really needed to do the work that your jurisdiction is looking for.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. If any folks have questions that they'd like to have answered today, please add those into the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question out loud. But I think that's all the questions that I'm seeing for right now.
Right, maybe let's give folks another minute or so.
Yep, so I have just a follow up from Nicole to confirm there will be 700,000 available for plans, and the maximum for plans is 500,000.
That is correct. So budget wise, it's a pretty limited availability. Again, it's just shaped by the guidelines that are the ATP guidelines. But if you anticipate your plan does need the full 500,000, please submit it, and it might compete well and be selected. If you feel like your plan only needs the 200,000, 100,000, whatever it may be, we're really just looking for applicants to have a scope of work and budget that really kind of shows and it makes sense, like this is the level of effort needed, and then this is where, crafting a competitive application and responding to the questions with the evaluation rubric in mind, that's where the competitive nature of the call comes into play.
Another question here from Marianne. Is there a limited number of applications per entity?
There is no limit. Really, comes down to your team's capacity to submit applications and thinking about how many projects your team would be able to manage. Yeah, no limit.
We'll give it just another minute or so to see if we have any other questions from folks. If not, if no other questions, if we're not seeing any right now, we can shift to the ending here, I think.
Okay, let's see here.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Okay. So again, thank you all for participating in today's application workshop. To learn more about this call, we really appreciate all the fantastic questions you all asked. Really shows you've all taken a look at the guidelines and we're following along with our workshop. And also want to give a big thank you to our AV support, Jennifer. Thank you so much for making this a very streamlined process. And so, as we mentioned at the beginning, this recording, so the presentation and this Q&A session, it will be posted on SCAG's website and also emailed to all of you who registered. We will also be developing a FAQ document that essentially takes a lot of the questions that were asked here and through the workshop registration, and that'll be made available. And we'll be aiming to update that as we have more office hours and folks continue to ask questions. We've gotten some really fantastic questions so far. And then if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out, send me an email, schedule office hours. We're here to help. If you have any questions about the program or even any of the elements such as how to fill out the scope of work, any questions about the budget template, we're more than happy to help. So thank you again. We really appreciate your time and interest, and we wish that you stay safe and healthy. Thank you so much.